I was reading in Mark, the book of Mark, and in the book of Mark, there's this section where Jesus is about to perform a miracle. He actually just performed a miracle, and he's heading over to a different land. It's called the land of the Gerasenes, and this was a land that was occupied by many non-Jewish people. They were called the Gentiles. And so Jesus, he just performed this miracle, and he just did all this amazing stuff, and then he heads over into this other land, and I want to look at this verse. Again, I always say this, I like funny verses. I like just interesting, weird stuff that you wouldn't normally see when you're looking at the Bible, because I just think it's fun to kind of see what God is doing in the midst of his word. So when we look at Mark chapter 2, we see this. It says, Jesus got out of the boat, and this is what happened. A man with an impure spirit, he came out of the tombs to meet Jesus. This man with the impure spirit lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain, for he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. This guy was possessed by demons. He was so strong because of the demon possession that chains would not even subdue him. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. Crazy. What we see here is someone who's being attacked by the demonic, but also who has the demonic possessing his life to the point where he's cutting himself with stones. He's got extra human strength. He's breaking chains, and not in like the song way, like the Lord breaks my chains, not that type of thing. Like he needs to be held back, and he's not doing it. Then what happens? Jesus gets off the boat. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him, which gives us a really great perspective that no matter how terrible, how much of a hellion you've been, still this man who's possessed with a legion of demons ran to Jesus. Think about that. He ran to Jesus. Now, at the moment he runs, the demon starts to come out, and it says, he shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." Isn't it interesting when a demon tries to use God's name? In God's name, don't torture me. For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." Now what happens after this moment, Jesus then casts those demons out, and the demons are like, "Jesus, don't just like let us go into the air, put us into something. Can we go into those pigs right there?" And Jesus is like, "Yeah, go into the pigs, dude, I don't care." The spirits inhabit the pigs. The pigs run off a cliff and die. We're having bacon tonight, boys. So they run off this cliff, they die. And this is what happens after this. Mark 15:4 or Mark 5:14. Those tending the pigs, because they were there, they watched the whole thing happen. They're like, "Yo, what's going on?" It's crazy. Those tending the pigs, they ran off and reported this into the town and the countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw who had been the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons. So they bring all their friends. They're like, "Hey, this is just what happened." They gather the townspeople. They come in and they say, "Look at this." When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed, and in his right mind. And this is the part I want to get to. And they were afraid. Why would they be afraid? Wouldn't this be the most amazing situation? You just saw this man you knew who was cutting himself, butt naked, chained and breaking chains like crazy, running around screaming at the top of his lungs in tombs. That's crazy. I'm afraid of that. If some of you started acting that way, I'd be like, "Security, right? What's going on?" I'm afraid of that. But then the townspeople, once he's sitting there dressed and in his right mind, what he does is seemingly normal. The townspeople come and they see him. They see that Jesus had set him free. And what happened? They were afraid. Those who had seen it and told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man and told them about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. This is so interesting because I think a lot of times we are more afraid of freedom than we are of our own bondage. And we see this happening many times with addictions. You're too afraid to be free. You're afraid of what you might lose. They're afraid of they might lose more pigs or more cattle, but they forget that someone was completely healed. They forget that God did something here to bring someone out of bondage, but that freedom is scary to them because it requires something of them. Too afraid to be free. They're too afraid to walk in the authority that God has for them. And I see this in Christians. I've had this in my own life. I was 16 years old at a summer camp. We're all going to a summer camp. Some of you are 16-ish. Some of you wish you were 16 again. I was 16 years old at a summer camp. God told me to do something, and I was very afraid. I was very afraid. Because I knew that when God spoke, it required something of me. Those people who saw this man free, they knew it was going to cost them something, and they didn't want to give that thing up. They were too afraid to step into freedom. And what they thought was, if I could just hold my stuff, if I could just have everything that I wanted, if I could just keep my pigs and keep my life the way it is, stay in my comfortable zone, that will be the best way that I can continue on floating through life. But we are forgetting the whole picture of eternity. That if you want to enter into God's freedom, God, the being who is infinitely free, who is bound by no one, and then we have us with our many masters, our addictions, our emotions, the things that people think about us, those masters that try to enslave our lives. We would rather keep them because they're comfortable and we know them than actually go to the Lord and say, I want freedom. I want freedom, even if I have to be a crazy person and run to the feet of Jesus. I thought it was interesting in the verse, the people who was the guy who was demon possessed, what did he do? He ran to Jesus. And the people who owned the pigs, who had their lives all together, what did they do? They ran away and tattletaled. Jesus heard our pigs. First off, Jesus didn't do it. The demons asked for it. He just allowed it. But they went away and tattletaled. And then when Jesus was still standing there, instead of going, you, the Son of God, the Messiah who's come to help us and free us, can you also free me of my iniquities? They didn't say that. They said, will you please leave? Because you're disrupting something. The reason we go away to a summer camp, the reason why we do what we do, is so that people can get free. But let me tell you something. If you're too afraid to be free, you will ask Jesus to step away. You will ask him to, please remove yourself from this area of my life. Because if you are in my life, I understand that you're God and I have to say yes. I have to obey. And you know what? I have to be free. But I'm too afraid to be free. I imagine like a dog that's been caged for a long time in a kennel, and you open the door and it's shaking to the point where it's afraid to step out into the freedom. But we have to understand that anytime we do with God, it was always going to be good. It's always going to work. It's never going to be against us. It's always going to be for his kingdom. But guess what? You're a part of his kingdom, which means it will always work out according to his will, which means it will always be good. But we can't be too afraid to be free. If you have to set up your mind at collision that you're going to go and you're not going to actually lay it down, what happens is you're more caught up in your own fears than you are enthralled in God's freedom he has for you. And we want to be enamored by the things that he's going to bring us. I remember there's this really cool saint. His name is Saint Augustine. He lived in like the 300s, so like thousands of years ago. And he was caught up in sins that kept him from God. He knew what he should do. He knew intellectually, but he couldn't get his heart to do it because he was too afraid to be free. He says this. He said, I feared to be freed of all these things that impeded me. There were things that were in my way. They impeded me. They got in the way. I was too afraid of them. And as strongly as I ought to have feared the being impeded by them, I didn't. He said, I so was caught up in the things that were in front of me, that impeded me. I was as strongly caught up in them, but I ought to have feared being impeded by them. That's really old language for this idea. The idea is this: Christ is asking you, do you want to be free? And he asks a lot of questions whenever he's doing healings. It's really funny. He'll ask like a question like, what can I do for you, to a blind man? And the blind man's like, I can't see, right? Or someone whose family member is passing away. He'll ask him a question. It almost seems like he's kind of making fun of them. He's not. He's actually asking them, do you want the thing that you say you want? I want to be free from this addiction. Actually, he can help you. But that means you're not going to have that anymore. Do you love your sin so much that you're willing to separate from God? Man, sometimes we do. Are you too afraid to be free? Are you too afraid of what you're going to lose and not what you're going to gain? Christianity is not about what you lose. It actually is about what you gain. But the thing is, if you're wanting to gain it, you're going to have to leave something. The disciples, when Jesus said, follow me, they had to leave something in order to follow. But what they gained in following was like a treasure in a field. What they gained in following was like a man who knew that treasure was buried somewhere in the field, so he was willing to sell it all and buy that field because of the buried treasure. He knew that what he was getting in the end was worth so much more, even if it was below the ground and he couldn't see it, and he had to step out in faith and say, I'm willing to step out even when I'm too afraid to be free. I see this with addictions. I see this with relationships. I see this with mindsets. I see this with fear. I see that just with you stepping out and being social and living in a bubble of anxiety. People, if you're watching online and you're afraid to come in here, you're being enslaved to fear. It's a really simple concept. But the sad thing that happened at the very end of the story, when the men of the Gerasenes, they said, hey, please leave us, Jesus, don't come back. You know what Jesus did? He answered their request. He left. And the Bible never records him going back. Jesus is such an honorable God that if you ask him, please step out of this area in my life, he will. But that means you've lost something. So if you're here and you say, there's an area in my life I've asked God to leave and I need to welcome him back, but that means in order to welcome him in, I need to get rid of some stuff in the house. Like if I'm gonna have him move in, I'm gonna need to get rid of all the stuff I put in his room and in his home that are taking up the space that he should be inhabiting. But I'm too afraid to lose that stuff that will never gain me any eternal value, will never actually benefit my life. I'm too afraid to lose it. I'm too afraid to be free. All of this is here setting up so that God can give you something even better. What you gain is even better. So if you say that's you, or if you're just here, I want everyone to stand. If you say that's you and you're like, hey, I need to be free, but I'm too afraid to be free. We're about to go into a season prepping for a summer camp that we do at Collision. And you should be aware that those altars are meant to allow you to step in freedom. But if you're going up there and posturing yourself, but you don't desire true freedom, you will get exactly what your desire is: continued bondage. Are you too afraid to be free? Go ahead, close your eyes, bow your heads. If you say, I'm here in this place and I love the idea of God, but I haven't stepped out in the Lord. I haven't genuinely said, God, you are my life, and I'm gonna step in true Christ-like freedom. Or if you're here and you say, I've been a Christian, or I'm claiming Christ, but I'm kicking him out of rooms in my house right now. I'm not allowing him to have the whole of me. And I only want him when it's convenient for me, not him when he asks me to follow and I lose something. I'm living in selfish Christianity. If either of those are you, just raise that hand. You say, I'm too afraid to step out in freedom. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Maybe you're afraid right now and that's why you're not raising your hand. Thank you, thank you, thank you. What I'd say is don't be held back by that fear. You're saying, I'm too afraid to step out. I'm too afraid to do what's right. I'm too afraid to step up. I'm too afraid to even ask God, because I know if I ask God, it will require something of me. But let me promise you, everybody, what you gain is always better. Say this prayer with me. Say this, say, Jesus, tonight, I want to be free. I run to you, Jesus. I'm not going to run away and tattletale just to get my way. But I will run to you. I will ask you to free me for flesh or even demonic presences in my life. Areas the devil has tempted me and he's trying to kill me. Lord, I believe you died and rose again. You are the Lord of my life. I give you every piece of me. In your name, everybody said, amen. Come on, give God a hand. Give the Lord a hand. Amen.